Now, before we dive into asynchronous tests or these hooks I mentioned, there's one other thing I want to do first though. And that's related to this test here in the numbers test.js file, where I'm testing whether I'm getting back an array that contains numeric values. At the moment, we're testing it like this, and this works, but we could also write our expectations slightly differently, and we could write expect cleaned numbers to be this kind of array, right? And maybe comment out this assertion, though you could also leave it in. This could be an expectation you have. We're passing this array into clean numbers, and we're expecting to get this array as a result. Now, if you would write it like this, and you run npm test, you will see that it fails. And that might be confusing. Why does it fail? It gets even more confusing, at least initially, if you look at the reason for why this failed. Expected this array to be this array. Yeah, why did it fail? I mean, these arrays are equal, aren't they? Well, we get a little hint here. When you use to_be, you really expect a value to be exactly the value you specify here. And you might recall that in JavaScript, but actually in many programming languages, there is a difference between primitive values like numbers or strings and reference values. In JavaScript, for example, 1 is always equal to 1. But in JavaScript, an object defined like this is not equal to an object defined like this. This is not true even though they look similar, because in JavaScript, objects are reference values. They are stored in memory, and if you create a new object, even if it has the same shape and the same properties, these two objects still occupy different places in memory, and they are therefore treated as totally different values. Attached to this video, you find an article that allows you to dive a little bit deeper into this primitive versus reference value thing, but this is something you should know about JavaScript. Well, and to_be checks for exact equality, and two arrays, even if they look similar, aren't the exact same object, because arrays are just objects in the end, and they occupy different places in memory. For convenience though, VTest and also Jest support the toEqual method though. And toEqual, unlike to_be, does not check for exact equality, but instead it simply goes through the value you pass to toEqual, and it does a deep comparison of that value with the value you are evaluating. So toEqual will in the end evaluate both values, the expected value and the actual value, deeply. A deep comparison will be performed, so all the properties and their values will be compared to each other, and therefore toEqual can be used here to actually make this test pass, because toEqual will now check if the values are the same inside of that array. So if we're not having the exact same objects in memory, but if these objects instead have the same shape and the same values, which would be the case here. So that's why we could use toEqual here for this kind of assertion in this test if we wanted to, but the key takeaway is not whether you use toEqual or to_be type of number. There are different reasons for picking either of the two, but the key takeaway instead is the difference between toEqual and to_be, which look similar but behave differently under the hood.